They sent a nurse instead of coming themselves. That's how it started. I was still groggy from the stroke, my mouth dry, tongue thick, and eyes not quite adjusting to the morning light, when I noticed my overnight bag wasn't at the foot of my bed anymore. A young woman in scrubs stood by the window, clipboard in hand, and behind her a van idled outside the hospital's discharge entrance. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, like we'd met before. "Ready to go, ka. Go where I," and blinked at her, unsure whether to answer or press the call button for the nurse I knew. The one who held my hand 3 nights ago when I was convinced I was dying. This one had a badge that said Crescent Pines Transitional Care. Not the hospital, not rehab. I asked about my son. Jason. He was supposed to pick me up. He promised. I had his voicemail saved, the one where he said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'm coming. I'll be there. Be there." The girl glanced over her shoulder, her voice suddenly low. "I'm not supposed to say anything," she murmured. "But don't trust him tonight. Just be careful." "Okay." I didn't understand what she meant, but something in her voice chilled me more than the hospital air. They wheeled me out before I could even protest. My shoes didn't match. My purse was zipped shut with someone else's hand. A man I didn't recognize signed the paperwork on a clipboard and gave me a gentle smile as if this were all perfectly normal. "Welcome to Crescent Pines, Mrs. Whitmore. You're going to love it there." I wasn't even given a chance to say goodbye to the nurse who'd braided my hair 2 mornings ago. She called me sweetheart. She remembered my name. She remembered my son's name. It was raining as we pulled away. The world beyond the window was gray and formless. I stared out and waited for Jason to appear in the rearview mirror, running toward me, shouting for the van to stop, that it was a mistake that he loved me. He didn't. The drive was long. I had to ask to use the bathroom at a gas station halfway there. The man escorting me said it wasn't protocol, but he'd make an exception. I tried to call Jason from the payphone near the restroom. His number went straight to voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered into the phone, ashamed of my voice. "I think something's wrong." They picked me up, but no one explained anything. "Can you call me?" "Please." When we arrived at Crescent Pines, it didn't look like a care facility. It looked like a meditation resort, long gravel path, tall trees, a circular building with wood siding and etched glass doors. There were wind chimes, incense, soft flute music playing through hidden speakers. They gave me a private room. The bed was made. The floor was warm. There was a small card with my name printed in lavender ink, Eleanor Whitmore, guest of renewal. They kept calling me a guest, but I couldn't leave. I asked to call my son. They told me it was part of the detox to refrain from contact for 72 hours. "You'll feel so much better without external emotional distractions," a woman said, touching my shoulder. Her hands were warm and dry. "This is about you now, Eleanor. You gave enough to others." I wanted to scream, but I nodded, because I didn't know where I was or why I was there, and part of me wondered if maybe I'd agreed to it in the hospital and forgotten. Maybe I'd signed something in the middle of a morphine fog. Maybe Jason really had tried to reach me. The meals came in silence. They served bone broth in handmade ceramic bowls. No salt, no caffeine, no sugar. I didn't even know what day it was. There were no clocks. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. I thought about the nurse's whisper. "Don't trust him tonight." Over and over. It didn't make sense. Jason had always taken care of me. Always. Hadn't he? The third morning I asked to go home. The facilitator smiled at me like I'd made a joke. "This is home now, Eleanor. You're with us for the full renewal cycle." 4 weeks of peace. 4 weeks. I stood up. My legs wobbled. I went to the window and looked out. There was a fence. Not chain link, something beautiful, wooden and curved like sculpture, but a fence nonetheless. I saw a staff member walk the perimeter with a clipboard. I saw another gently steer an elderly man in a robe back toward the courtyard. This wasn't a retreat. It was something else, and the signature that got me here wasn't mine. That night, I opened the drawer by the bed and found a small folder tucked beneath a Bible and a guided meditation CD. It had the retreat logo embossed on the front. I opened it. Inside was my intake form. I hadn't written a word of it. Under decision-making, Agent Jason's name was listed. Under consent to treatment, the signature didn't match mine. It was neat. Too neat. My hand shook as I turned the page. I read the same sentence again and again. Patient exhibits post-stroke cognitive ambiguity. Best interest to be handled by primary family caregiver Jason Whitmore. I pressed my fingers to my lips. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair by the window, the folder in my lap, staring out at the mist between the trees, and listened for the wind chimes. But all I heard was the nurse's voice whispering again, and this time I knew exactly who she meant. When Jason was born, I thought he saved me. I was 25, newly widowed, and barely able to afford milk. His father Henry died in a car accident on a Thursday night coming home from the late shift. They said it was instant. I didn't cry at the funeral, not because I wasn't in pain, but because I hadn't earned the time to grieve. I had a newborn, a mortgage, and Henry's debts, so I taught myself how to survive. I sold my wedding ring 3 weeks later, used the cash to fix the furnace before the Minnesota winter rolled in. Took a job as a part-time substitute at the local middle school, then cleaned motel bathrooms on weekends. Jason never knew we were poor. I made sure of that. He had hand-stitched Halloween costumes. He had a bike before his friends did. I didn't have dental insurance, but he had piano lessons. He used to kiss my hand after I tucked him in. "Thank you for the day, Mommy," he'd whisper like some little prince. I lived off those tiny rituals. They made it easier when my back ached and my fingers cracked from bleach. Easier when I came home and found the fridge light out again and bills jammed under the door. When he got into UCLA for undergrad, I almost passed out from pride. I framed the acceptance letter and put it in the hallway. When he came home that Christmas, he asked me not to display it. "It's weird, Mom. It's just college." But it wasn't just anything to me. I took out a home equity loan that year to help with tuition. I told him I had some savings. I didn't. I just lied well. I even picked up a third job, laundry, at the nursing home down the street. I folded sheets until my knuckles locked. But I didn't tell him that either. After UCLA, he applied to med school, said he wanted to specialize in geriatrics. I remember thinking, he chose that for me. For all those years he watched me clean up after other people's mothers and fathers. It felt poetic, like something had come full circle. We were close. That's what I told people. "Oh, Jason, we're close. Best friends." He used to call every Sunday. We had a ritual 4 p.m. sharp, even when he moved across the country for residency. When he met Lacey, it shifted a little. Not all at once, but the calls got shorter, the check-ins more polite. He started asking about my blood pressure, my diet, how much I was walking, not my heart, not my thoughts, just the stats. Lacey was sweet at first, smiled too much, brought candles to family dinners and told me stories about her yoga retreat in Oregon. I didn't understand half of what she said, but I smiled through it. She had that kind of voice, the let me take over now tone that slides in between your ribs and pokes around. After they got married, they asked me to sell the house. Jason said it was too big. Too much upkeep. You're alone in there, Mom. You don't need all that space. I said I didn't mind. I liked the garden, the sunroom. Lacey said, it's not safe for her to be climbing stairs at her age. At her age. I was 58. Eventually I said yes. I sold it, used some of the money to pay down Jason's med school loans, gave the rest to them for a down payment on a bigger place one with a guest suite just for me. That was how they framed it. You'll have your own little apartment. It's basically independent living. The suite was beige, no windows. The walls smelled like dry paint. They put a coated lock on the pantry. Just to help with portion control, Lacey said. You tend to graze a little too much when you're stressed. I stopped eating after 8 p.m., not because I believed her, but because the beep of the keypad made me feel like a thief. I kept my belongings in plastic tubs in the closet. Lacey said she was redecorating. I waited for 5 months. Nothing changed. One night I got up to use the bathroom and overheard them talking in the kitchen. Jason was whispering. Lacey was pacing. I heard my name clipped and low. She's just not capable of managing it anymore. It's too much. She forgets things. I do not, I whispered into the dark, too afraid to move. She left the oven on again, Lacey said. And I found those pills, the expired ones. It's only a matter of time before something happens. You have to think about protecting her and yourself. Jason didn't respond right away. Then he said, we'll figure something out. The next week I had a stroke. It was minor, the doctor said. I was lucky. But it scared me. I remember lying in the hospital bed waiting for Jason to walk through the door for his face to appear and his hand to find mine like it used to. I remember the moment the door opened. It wasn't him. It was a woman from the billing department. She handed me a packet and said, your son signed the release. You're being transferred. The papers were a blur of formal language and soft betrayals. Transitional care, limited capacity, best interests. A signature I couldn't remember writing. That was the first time I felt it. Not fear. Not betrayal. Emptiness. Like I'd poured myself into someone my entire life, and now there was nothing left but the shell of a mother who had mistaken sacrifice for love. I started waking up before the morning bell at Crescent Pines. It wasn't a bell, really, more of a soft tone that played from speakers hidden in the walls like a soundscape from a spa commercial. A hollow chime, then silence, then another chime. A rhythm designed to replace urgency with surrender. But I wasn't surrendering. I lay still each morning waiting for the chime to end, staring at the ceiling beams above my bed. They were painted white, but one of them had a crack that reminded me of a branch split by wind. Each day I watched that crack like it would move, like it might finally break open and tell me something I didn't already know. The room had no clock. They said it was intentional to free you from time's tyranny according to the brochure they'd tucked into my welcome basket. I kept it folded beneath my pillow. I read it in the dark sometimes like a survival manual. The days blurred into each other. Group activities, herbal teas, gentle music, therapy sessions with laminated worksheets and warm words that felt rehearsed. I learned to smile when spoken to nod when I was told this is healing. But nothing was healing. It was quiet, yes, but it wasn't peace. Peace is something you choose. This was something chosen for me. At lunch one day, I sat across from a woman named Carol. She had cloud-colored hair and eyes like river stones. She'd been there for 3 months. "Voluntary," she whispered. "Except not really. My daughter thinks I'm better off here. Easier to manage." "Manage?" I repeated. She looked at me for a long time. "Easier to forget." I didn't ask again. After meals, they let us walk the perimeter garden. I say let because that's what it felt like permission. It was always supervised gently. A staff member would linger nearby, their voice friendly, but their eyes always tracking. One afternoon, I stopped to rest beside the koi pond. The fish swam in perfect circles, their mouths opening and closing in soundless hunger. A girl in uniform approached and offered me peppermint water. I looked at her face, and for a second I thought she might be the same one who'd whispered to me that first morning, but it wasn't her. Just the same age, the same look of warning buried under politeness. "I asked if I could make a phone call," she said gently. "You'd need to request that through your care liaison." "And how long does that take?" "Typically within a few weeks, unless it's a crisis." "Is this not a crisis?" I asked softly. She didn't answer. That night, I sat at the edge of the bed with the window open a sliver. I watched the dark roll over the trees like a tide. I listened to the wind chimes tapping against one another like teeth. I tried to remember the sound of Jason's laugh. The real one, not the polite chuckle he used with colleagues or in front of Lacey. The one he had when he was 7 and knocked over the cereal display at the grocery store and said, "Guess I'm not ready for adulthood." He used to call me his safe place. I looked around the room. Every surface was clean. Every item placed with intention. My comb was gone, replaced with a boar bristle brush. My nightgown had been washed without asking. The scent was lavender now. I hated lavender. Lacey loved it. I went to the closet and opened it. My clothes, what few I had hung like strangers. Neatly pressed. No wrinkles. No warmth. Not one item I recognized from my house. Not the scarf Jason gave me at Christmas 3 years ago. Not the cardigan I'd had since Henry was alive. Everything I touched had already been packed away. The thought hit me so suddenly I had to sit down. They'd planned this before the stroke. The signs had been there. Lacey's comments about long-term solutions. Jason's sudden interest in my medications. The surprise appointment with the elder care consultant last spring, the one I thought was just a helpful neighbor. It hadn't started in the hospital. It had started before. I closed the closet door and leaned my forehead against the wood. It was smooth, cold, unyielding. I stayed like that for a long time. That's when the emptiness began. Not grief, not rage, just absence. A soft, soundless shift, like a candle going out in a room you'd already left. I stopped asking for things after that. I went to the sessions. I sipped the tea. I folded my blanket in the morning and unfurled it at night. I became what they said I was, a guest. A quiet guest. A manageable guest. But I was watching. One evening during a guided meditation, they asked us to imagine a safe place. Most people described beaches or sunrooms. I said nothing, because my safe place was gone. I had sold it. Given it away brick by brick to people I thought would hold it for me when I got tired. I didn't think they'd bury it instead. At the end of the session, the facilitator placed a warm stone in my palm. "To help you anchor," she said. I closed my fingers around it. It was smooth, pleasant to hold. I wondered how it would feel if I threw it through a window. I wasn't supposed to have that folder. They left it by mistake, I'm sure of it now. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Thursday. The days felt like wet paper, all the edges blurred and soft. One of the young staff members, a boy with careful hands and too much cologne, had dropped off a tray with chamomile tea and something they called a bedtime mindfulness packet. I didn't open it at first. I was too tired from pretending I belonged there. It wasn't until after midnight, when the lights outside my window flickered off and the hallways grew quiet, that I unfolded the packet on my lap. Tucked between 2 pages was a manila file I'd never seen before. At first I thought it was part of the therapy, maybe a worksheet, but the pages were heavier. Legal paper, initialed, notarized, and at the top in blue ink, a header: authorization of power of attorney. Durable Medical and Financial Authority. My name was typed neatly at the top. Eleanor Grace Whitmore. I didn't feel anything yet. I just started reading. The document stated that I had, on July 19th, 2 weeks after my stroke, voluntarily signed over my financial and medical power of attorney to my son, Jason Whitmore, in the presence of a notary public and 2 witnesses. Except I didn't. On July 19th, I was in ICU. I couldn't lift a fork, let alone hold a pen. I remember that day specifically. A nurse had tried to feed me oatmeal, and I'd cried because I couldn't swallow. They had me on IV fluids and blood thinners. I couldn't speak clearly yet. And now here I was, holding proof that someone my son had signed away my autonomy while I was still drifting between lucidity and delirium. I flipped the page. There were itemized statements of assets: my pension, the small life insurance from Henry, the balance left from the house sale, all now subject to custodial discretion under durable POA. There was a subclause I almost missed a single paragraph in dense legal jargon. I read it 3 times before it registered. Remaining estate assets upon full transfer of care authority shall be accessible by the designated overseer for health maintenance and custodial purposes per agreed discretion. Custodial overseer, not Jason, not even Jason and Lacey, just her. Lacey Whitmore. Her signature was the final one, not on the main POA that was Jason's, but on the care agreement filed underneath, the one that requested placement in a renewal retreat, pre-selecting Crescent Pines as my sanctuary of preference. Her handwriting was all loops and flourishes, that slow, sweeping confidence that says I've done this before. I sat there with the pages fanned out across my lap, the silence of the room pressing in around me like a closing fist. It had been her idea, not just the facility, all of it. The pantry locks, the therapist visit, the guest suite, the gentle nudges Jason echoed but never fully understood. She'd orchestrated every detail. Jason had always been easy to lead. He had a good heart once, but a soft spine. He was brilliant in school, in labs, in the operating room, but not with people, especially not strong ones. He married strength because he thought it would protect him. He never considered what it might cost me. I gathered the pages back into the folder and slipped it under the mattress. In the morning, I asked to see the care liaison. The receptionist smiled, eyes blank. She's out until Monday. What about a phone? You're still in phase 2 of your care cycle, she said. Phone access becomes available in phase 4. When is that? She looked down. Another 2 weeks. I smiled then, a full cold smile, because I no longer needed their phone. I just needed time. That afternoon, I sat through guided journaling like I always did. I wrote what they wanted me to write: gratitude, release, mindful surrender. Then I watched Carol, the woman who'd warned me her daughter thought she was easier to forget, get called away for a private session. She never came back. They said she was transferred to a different unit, closer to family. Her name was scrubbed from the board by evening. That night, I retrieved the folder again and read every line like scripture. I looked at Jason's signature, tried to remember the last time he'd written me a birthday card, and realized he hadn't. Not in years. Lacey sent e-cards. That was her version of sentiment. At 3 a.m., I crept to the bathroom down the hall. In the mirror, I studied my face, the lines around my mouth, the softness under my jaw, the silver in my hair, the faded scar on my neck from a mole they removed when I was 39. I didn't look fragile. I looked like a woman whose life had been stolen in stages. I looked like someone who'd been disappearing quietly for years in teaspoons, in suggestions, in signed documents she didn't remember agreeing to. Until now. Now I remembered everything. The next morning, I told the staff I wanted to participate in the full-day silent retreat. They were thrilled. "That's such a deep commitment," one of them said. "It will really help you center." But I wasn't centering. I was listening. During the silent retreat, we were allowed to walk the gardens alone, unsupervised for the first time. I found the volunteer wing, a different set of buildings, smaller, humble. And behind one of the windows, I saw her, the nurse from the hospital, the one who'd whispered, "Don't trust him tonight." I tapped on the window. She looked up. And when her eyes met mine, they widened not with fear, but recognition. She remembered. And so did I. Her name was Maya, the nurse from the hospital, the one who had slipped those words into my ear like a key into a locked room. "Don't trust him tonight." She was working part-time at Crescent Pines while finishing her RN licensing hours. I found her by accident, or maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe something in me knew that when the truth is too big to bear alone, the universe sometimes sends you a witness. When she opened the window, she looked around nervously and said, 5 minutes. That was all she could give me. "I remember you," I whispered. "You braided my hair." She smiled, but it was sad. "I remember you too. I need to ask you something. Did you see anything when I was in ICU?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned the walkway behind me, then returned to my face. "He came the night you signed your discharge papers." "Jason." She nodded. "He wasn't supposed to see you unsupervised. You were still foggy. But he said he had clearance." My stomach went cold. "Did I sign something that night?" She hesitated. "You held a pen, but your hand was shaking." He guided it. I stared at her. My throat felt thick. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I told the attending nurse, but there was nothing in writing. I didn't know what he was doing until later, when I saw your name in the Crescent Pines intake sheet. And when I tried to flag it, her voice dropped to a whisper. "They told me to stay in my lane." I nodded. Not because I was calm, but because I was beyond panic now. It had calcified into clarity. "Thank you," I said. She gripped my hand through the window bars. "I can get you copies of everything. Originals, my notes, the timestamp on his visit." I squeezed her fingers. "That's all I need." It took another week. A volunteer driver dropped me off at a bus terminal in Duluth. Maya had arranged it, told the staff I was being transferred to a sister facility up north. She even forged the paperwork herself. She looked me in the eye before I got into the van and said, "Don't waste it." "I won't." I didn't have a suitcase, just a manila envelope under my coat and a grocery bag with a change of clothes. I stayed at a women's shelter for 2 nights, sleeping with the documents against my chest. I didn't tell anyone my name. On the 3rd morning, I walked into a legal clinic with shaking knees and a dry mouth. The paralegal read through the file in silence. Her eyes narrowed. "This was notarized while you were in ICU." I nodded, and the witness signatures never met them. She pulled out her phone. "We can help." The lawyer who took my case was younger than Jason, soft-voiced but sharp. She didn't promise me revenge. She promised me record correction, which was enough. Jason and Lacey didn't know where I was until a week later when the papers were filed and the notice of rescindment was delivered to their doorstep. I didn't call. I didn't write. I just showed up. They were returning from a Sunday brunch, the kind with lemon cocktails and smiling waiters, when I stepped out of the neighbor's car and walked up their driveway. Lacey froze first. The color drained from her face like water swirling down a sink. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. I stood on the porch, envelope in hand. "Hi," I said evenly. "Mom?" he breathed. "Where how?" "You'll want to read this." I handed him the envelope. It's a copy of the revocation documents, filed, legal, witnessed. You no longer have power of attorney, and the account transfers you requested under false authority, those are under investigation. Lacey stepped forward, chin tilted. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "It isn't." "Mom, we thought you didn't think I was anything. You thought I was convenient." Jason flinched. "I came here today not because I want to talk. I came to look you both in the eyes." "One last time." Lacey's expression hardened. "We tried to help you." "No," I said gently. "You tried to own me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo frame she'd packed in my Crescent Pines comfort box. It had once sat on their mantel, a picture of the 3 of us at Jason's graduation, my hand on his shoulder. I held it up, then dropped it. It shattered on their doorstep. Lacey gasped. Jason stared at the broken glass like it meant something. "It didn't anymore." "I'm not your project," I said. "I'm not your guilt. And I'm not your mother anymore, not in any way that matters." I turned and walked down the driveway. Behind me, Jason called my name. Just once. I didn't turn around, because I wasn't his anymore. I was mine. I didn't go back to the house. I stayed at a motel for a while, a small one near the edge of town, the kind with paper-thin towels and floral bedspreads from another decade. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. She handed me my key and said, "Heat's a little fussy, but we've got good water pressure." I paid for a week in cash. Each night I sat at the small wooden desk and wrote down everything I remembered. Not just the betrayal, but the before. The early mornings I drove Jason to debate club. The time he scraped his knee and told me I was magic for fixing it. The day I sat in the front row at his white coat ceremony wearing the same dress I'd worn to his high school graduation because I couldn't afford another. I wrote it all down. Then I folded the pages and put them away, not because I needed to forget, but because I was finally ready to stop repeating the story to myself as if it had the power to change. It didn't. What happened, happened. The rest was mine to decide. The lawyer called me 3 weeks later. They haven't contested anything she said. Not yet. But the bank accounts have been frozen temporarily just to be safe. I don't want the money, I said. I just want it not to be theirs. She paused, then said, "That's a powerful kind of peace." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I found an apartment a month later, a second-floor unit in a quiet complex near the lake. Nothing fancy, just a clean kitchen, a little balcony with space for potted plants, and good light in the morning. The first thing I unpacked was my teacup, the one Jason gave me when he was 10. It had little violets painted on the side. I thought it was lost, but Maya had found it tucked in a drawer at Crescent Pines wrapped in tissue. She mailed it to me with a note. "You mattered. You still do. It sits by the window now. I drink from it every morning, not because it means he loved me, but because I did. And that counts for something. The neighbors are kind. One of them, Elaine, knocks every Friday and brings me leftover soup from her church dinners. We talk sometimes about recipes, the weather, what flowers do well in partial sun. I haven't told her much about Jason. When she asked if I had children, I said yes, then changed the subject. Not because I'm hiding, but because I'm no longer explaining. I walk now every evening just before sunset. There's a path behind the complex that leads to a little public garden. Someone planted tulips along the edge. They bloomed early this year. I stood there the first time I saw them, not thinking about Crescent Pines or Lacey's voice in my ear or Jason's silence since the confrontation. I just watched the petals sway in the wind. It was quiet. Not empty. Just quiet. Some days I still wonder if he regrets it. If he misses me. If he lies awake remembering the sound of my voice reading to him under that green lamp when he was small. But then I catch myself and stop, because that's no longer my job. My job now is waking up when the light is good and the tea is warm and the tulips are beginning to open. I don't need a return address to feel real. I don't need permission to exist. I just need time. And I have it now. The first time I went to the grocery store on my own again, I cried in the parking lot. Not loudly, not even visibly, just a tightness behind the eyes, a hot welling under the ribs. I sat in the driver's seat of my used Toyota, a car the lawyer's office helped me lease, and stared at the automatic doors opening and closing like a slow breath. People walked in and out with bags, phones, babies, flowers. So ordinary. I hadn't done something ordinary in months. At Crescent Pines, food came on trays. Choices were made for me. Even before that, living in their house, I was asked not to stock the fridge too emotionally. That was Lacey's phrase. She said it with a smile, holding up a pint of ice cream like it was evidence. I used to love grocery stores. The lists, the quiet rhythm of walking the aisles, the way I could take my time and remember who I was just by the shape of the apples or the weight of flour in my hands. Now even that felt like a test. I walked in slowly, kept my head down, avoided eye contact. I didn't want to be seen. I just wanted to move. In the produce section, I reached for a lemon and hesitated. I couldn't remember what brand of tea I used to buy. Everything felt unfamiliar, labels, logos, the too bright colors. I nearly left, but then I saw them. Violets. Potted tiny, tucked near the front with the seasonal displays. I picked one up. Its leaves were deep green fuzzy, and the blooms were delicate pale purple soft around the edges. The kind Jason used to bring home in Dixie cups for Mother's Day. I placed it in the cart next to the lemons, and suddenly my hands stopped shaking. Small rituals. That's what keeps you tethered. Not justice. Not answers. A lemon. A violet. I went home and made tea. In the following days, I started cooking again. Slowly. Carefully. Just for myself. Not because anyone was watching or grading or waiting to be impressed. Just because the kitchen was mine. I made oatmeal with cinnamon and brown sugar, sliced apples like I used to for Jason when he was sick. The smell filled the apartment in the mornings, clean, warm, real. The court process dragged on. They always do. No formal charges were filed, not yet. My lawyer said Jason was cooperating, that he hadn't denied the documents, just claimed misunderstanding and poor timing. Lacey didn't respond at all. I didn't ask for money back. I asked for autonomy. The court granted that. My accounts were frozen, then released to me with oversight until the investigation finished. I had to prove competence, which felt insulting, but I did it. Passed every test, explained every expense, recited my medications from memory. They gave me a piece of paper at the end that said cognitively independent. It meant nothing to anyone but me. To me, it meant I could breathe again. One morning, a letter came from Jason. No return address, just my name, my new address. Written in his handwriting, careful, slightly slanted, always looping his Y's too far. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. Inside 3 lines. Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know how to stop it. I hope you're okay. Jay. No excuses, no explanations, just a broken breadcrumb. I folded it and placed it in the back of the drawer behind my passport. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. You can love someone so much you forget to keep any for yourself, and by the time you look up, you've handed over every last piece of your body, your privacy, your past, and called it love. What Jason did wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. One made slowly. One that required printing forms, choosing a facility, drafting signatures. He didn't trip and fall into betrayal. He walked into it with open eyes. He just never imagined I'd walk out of it. Some nights I still hear voices in my dreams. Lacey telling me I needed structure. Jason asking if I'd remembered to take my pills. The wind chimes from Crescent Pines, but they're faint now. Echoes. The loudest sound in my life now is silence, real silence. The kind that fills an apartment with nothing but the hum of the fridge and the creak of the floorboards when you shift your weight. It isn't lonely. It's clean. I bought a journal. Leather-bound navy blue, no lines. I write in it most mornings. Not for memory. Not to process. Just to keep track of what happens when a person decides to return to herself. The entries are short. The tulips are taller today. I made soup. I added too much garlic. I liked it anyway. I woke up without dread. That one took weeks to write, but when I did, I underlined it. Elaine came over with muffins this morning. Blueberry wrapped in a paper towel, still warm from the oven. She knocked 3 times her signal, then waited until I called out before opening the door. That's our rhythm now. Gentle, respectful, slow. You don't have to eat them all, she said, setting them down on the counter. I just made too many. I thanked her. We stood in the kitchen for a moment, not talking. The sunlight through the window painted a warm stripe across the counter. Do you miss them? She asked suddenly. Your kids? I didn't answer right away. I took a long sip of tea, let the heat bloom in my mouth, and watched the steam rise. I miss who I thought they were, I said finally. She nodded like she understood. Me too. We didn't talk about it after that. We just sat on the balcony and listened to the wind rustle through the trees. The violets I bought at the store sat between us, a little overwatered, but blooming. After she left, I went back inside and opened my journal. Wrote I didn't cry. I didn't explain. That's growth. The letter from Jason stayed in the drawer. There was a time not long ago when I would have clung to it. Reread it. searched the spacing between words for sincerity, replayed his apology in my mind until it softened into something forgivable. But now I only think of it when I dust. It's strange how grief changes shape. In the beginning, it's sharp. It cuts, bleeds, screams. Later, it dulls, turns into a hum in the background. And eventually, it becomes a kind of stillness, not absence, but acceptance. You stop needing the story to change. You just learn to walk through it. There was a voicemail from the clinic lawyer today. She said the investigation was likely to close with no further action. That Jason's cooperation plus my notarized statements and medical records had satisfied the board. The documents had been deemed questionable but non-criminal largely due to medical ambiguity around my stroke, meaning, she said gently, they can't prove intent. Only inference. I thanked her. She sounded surprised. I thought you'd be disappointed. I was never after punishment, I said. Just permission. Permission to move forward. I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. There was no justice. Not really. But there was clarity, and that was enough. That evening, I pulled out a cardboard box from the closet, the one I'd packed with the few things that were still mine after I left the house. I hadn't opened it since moving in. Inside, a broken ceramic angel from my old kitchen windowsill, a folder of Jason's elementary school art, one of Henry's old wallets, the leather worn soft at the edges, my mother's rosary even though I hadn't prayed in years, a copy of The Secret Garden with a grocery receipt from 1997 marking the page. I didn't cry. I just ran my hand over each item and whispered, "You made it." Not all of me had survived. Some pieces, soft, generous, unguarded, were gone. Left behind at hospital bedsides, dinner tables, court filings, but some had made it, and they were enough to begin again. Later that night, I lit a candle in the kitchen, not for ritual, not for grief, just for light. And I sat there long after the flame burned low, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint wind through the trees and the truth settling into my bones. That I was still here, not waiting, not wondering, just being. There's a little library down the street from my apartment. I go there every Tuesday. I walk the whole way even when it's hot or windy or raining, because something in the ritual makes me feel grounded, like a promise I still keep to myself. The library is small, 2 floors, maybe 8 rows of books, a children's corner with faded beanbags. It smells like old paper and citrus cleaner. I like it there. It's quiet in a way that doesn't press down on you. They have a shelf labeled local histories. Mostly old pamphlets, neighborhood newsletters, and photocopies of interviews with people who lived here long before me. I read them sometimes not for the stories themselves, but for the feeling. The reminder that lives go on, that someone once cared enough to write down the day Mrs. Horton's cat got stuck in a maple tree. We leave traces even when we think we're invisible. Last week, I found one of Jason's old science fair ribbons in my journal. It must have slipped in during the move. First place, 1997. Something about plant germination. I remembered the night before the fair staying up with him until almost midnight, hot gluing photos onto a foam board while he practiced his speech with a cereal box as a pretend audience. He had a lisp back then. He hated it. I used to tell him, "It's not broken. It's just yours." I wonder if he remembers that. Sometimes I wonder if he ever looks at me in his mind and sees a person or just a story he tells himself to justify things. She couldn't handle being alone. She was slipping. It was safer that way. I wonder if he believes it, or if Lacey whispered it enough times that he didn't need to believe it, just repeat it. I think about these things less and less, but I don't lie to myself. I still think about them. I still carry the weight of choices I didn't make. Still feel the echo of the guest suite's silence. Still flinch sometimes when I hear wind chimes, but the flinches fade faster now. The memories pass through me like a train that doesn't stop, loud, full of faces I once knew but gone before I can wave. The apartment feels more like home these days. I hung a curtain in the kitchen's soft linen pale blue. I planted chives in a terracotta pot by the window. They're crooked and stubborn, but alive. I named them. I talk to them in the mornings while I make coffee. I call it reclaiming eccentricity. One afternoon, Elaine brought me a puzzle, a vintage scene of a garden party, all women in wide hats and soft smiles. We spent hours at my table placing tiny pieces into place without speaking. At one point, she looked up and said, "You ever think about going back to the old house?" I didn't even blink. "No." She nodded. "That was all. I don't need to revisit the battlefield. I don't need to see my bedroom turned into a home office or the dining table replaced with something cold and modern. I don't need to find my old scarf folded neatly in a drawer like a forgotten guest towel. The past doesn't live there anymore." Neither do I. I'm learning that healing isn't always joy. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's saying, "No, I don't want to talk about him," or "No, I'm not interested in seeing the new baby photos," or "No, I won't be attending the family reunion." And sometimes it's silence, just drinking your tea, clipping your chives, doing your puzzle. I haven't forgiven him. That's not something I owe. I'm not angry either, not the way I was. I just don't need him anymore. And there's power in that. People talk about closure like it's a door you slam shut, but I think it's quieter than that. More like leaving the room and not going back even when you hear your name being called. Especially then. It was an accident, really. I didn't mean to go back. I was taking the long way home from the pharmacy. It was a warm afternoon and the streets were quiet when I realized where I was. 2 blocks down, then 1 turn left, and I'd be in the old neighborhood. I told myself I'd just walk past. Just see the maple trees, maybe the porch swing if it was still there. A kind of archaeological curiosity. That's all. But curiosity has its own hunger. So I turned. The houses hadn't changed much. Lawn ornaments in new places. A different color of shutters, a few fresh fences. But the bones were the same. When I got to the corner, I stopped. There it was. My old house. The place I sold to help Jason. The one I gave up without hesitation, telling myself that comfort didn't matter as long as he had a future. The house I loved. The house I buried. It looked smaller. There was a ceramic owl on the porch now. Lacey's touch, probably. She liked things like that, decorative warnings. The yard was trimmed, but the flower beds were dull. The garden I used to spend hours tending was gone. Just mulch and a few stones. I didn't walk up the path. I stayed across the street in the shadow of the telephone pole, half hidden by a low hedge. Watching. It felt like standing outside a memory. The curtains were drawn. No sign of life inside. I wondered what Jason was doing. If he was home. If he knew what day it was. If he ever thought about the lemon cake I used to make every year on his birthday. I stood there for 10 minutes, maybe 12. Then I turned around. As I walked away, a breeze picked up. I heard the faintest clink of wind chimes. Not the same ones from Crescent Pines, but close enough to twist something deep in my ribs. I kept walking. I didn't look back. At home, I boiled water and poured it over 2 chamomile bags just to watch the steam rise. I sat in the chair by the window facing the tiny garden I was coaxing to life. Violets, chives, a few lazy nasturtiums. I thought of crescent pines, the softness of the walls, the tray of tea I never wanted. The smile Lacey gave me the night she suggested the guest suite, the kind that hides a knife under linen. And then I thought of Jason, age 5, running through the sprinklers in the backyard, squealing with joy as I chased him with a towel. He turned to me and shouted, "I'll never leave you, Mommy." He did, of course, in more ways than one. But I'm not 5, and promises made in innocence don't bind in betrayal. That boy is gone. The man he became, the one who watched his wife sign my freedom away, is not someone I need to wait for. But the memory of the boy, I don't need to destroy it either. I can let both exist. Grief and distance. Affection and silence. That's adulthood, isn't it? Holding the whole picture without needing to frame it. I used to think I had to choose between forgetting and forgiving. Between keeping the door open and bolting it shut. Now I understand. You can leave the house, you can leave the keys on the table, and you can still remember the sound of the floorboards when your child ran down the hall. Memory doesn't need permission, but peace does. It asks you to choose every day. To wake up in the home you built for yourself, not the one you were told to be grateful for. And some mornings it's still hard. There are dreams that claw. Mornings where silence feels sharp again. Afternoons when the light hits the window just so, and I think, he would have loved that. But those moments pass now. They visit. They don't stay. And when they leave, I'm still here. Still whole. Still mine. It came in a padded envelope. No note. No return address. Just my name written in Jason's handwriting again, that same careful loop, like he thought effort could disguise intention. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity is still human even now. Inside a flash drive, and a single photograph. I held the picture in my hands for a long time before flipping it over. It was the 3 of us, me, Jason, and Lacey, standing on the deck of the lake house they'd rented that summer after his residency match. I was smiling, but my eyes were tired. Jason had his arm around me. Lacey stood slightly off to the side, her hand on his back. I remembered that day. She'd asked me not to wear that blouse, said the color washed me out. I wore it anyway. The wind had been strong that afternoon. My hair was blowing across my face in the photo. I turned it over. Nothing written on the back. The flash drive sat on the table for 2 days before I plugged it in. Just one file. A video. Less than 5 minutes. Jason sitting on a bench in what looked like a park. Light shirt. No tie. The circles under his eyes deeper than I remembered. He stared into the camera like he was forcing himself not to look away. He started talking haltingly. "Hi, Mom." Pause. I know I'm not owed anything, least of all your time. I just wanted to say, I've been thinking. A lot. About everything. And I know sorry doesn't fix it. I know that. But I needed to say it anyway. Another pause. He rubbed his eyes, then looked down. She told me it was the only way, that you'd feel safer, that it would protect everyone. He shook his head. I didn't protect you. A long silence. Then I miss you, even if you don't want to hear that. I miss who I was when I was with you. The video ended. No fade, no music, just a black screen. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. Just a stillness that settled behind my ribs. Because I understood something now. Jason wasn't reaching out to make amends. He was reaching out to soothe his guilt. He wanted me to tell him it was okay. He wanted me to say he wasn't the villain. But I couldn't do that. Because I was no longer willing to abandon myself to make someone else feel whole. That had been my sickness, not the stroke, not the fall, not age. But the compulsion to lessen my pain if it meant someone I loved didn't have to feel theirs. That disease was in remission now. I ejected the flash drive, wrapped it in a paper towel, and placed it at the bottom of the kitchen trash. I kept the photo, not because I forgave him, but because I looked strong in it. Worn, yes, but whole. A woman in the middle of her life, not the end. A woman who had raised a man capable of betrayal and survived. That evening, I made lemon cake. The old recipe, with zest and sour cream and just enough sugar to remember how joy tastes. I didn't bake it for a holiday, not a birthday, not a reunion, just because I felt like I could. I cut a thick slice and placed it on the good plate. Sat in my kitchen, sunlight slanting across the counter, a violet in bloom beside the sink, and I ate every bite. Slowly, without apology. Some treasures had been recovered. Others more valuable still had been discovered for the first time. I'm not sure when I stopped waiting for something to be returned. Love, apology, understanding. But it happened somewhere between the violets and the lemon cake. Somewhere between not answering his letter and planting basil from seed just because I wanted to. The shift was small, but it changed everything. There are no locks on my cabinets now, no scheduled tea, no laminated affirmations hung on the wall. There's just a woman with soft joints and a sharp mind sitting by a window with her hands curled around a chipped teacup, the same one her son once bought at a school fundraiser with his allowance. And she is not broken. She's stillness. There's a difference. I spend most mornings in silence now. I've come to like the sound of nothing. The way quiet lets you hear things you once talked over the shift of sunlight, the creak of the walls, your own breath deepening after a dream. Sometimes I look out at the garden and see nothing but dirt, and sometimes I swear I see roots threading themselves through the earth like a prayer. It's strange the way healing doesn't come all at once. It shows up in the middle of a sentence, in the second sip of tea, in the decision not to explain yourself when someone asks why you live alone. It's not pride. It's not punishment. It's peace. Jason hasn't written again. I don't expect he will. Not because he doesn't want to, but because I think deep down he knows that I am no longer reachable by the old terms. He would have to start from nothing, from who I am now. From the woman he tried to sideline with signatures and retreat brochures, that version of me is gone. The one who gave and gave and gave, hoping someone would look back and say, I see you. I need you. I see myself now. I need me. That's enough. I don't talk much about what happened, not even to Elaine. When people ask, I just say I had to learn a new way of being, a quieter one. They nod like they understand. But I think only some people really do, the ones who've been discarded, forgotten, softened by grief, and then sharpened by survival. The ones who stood at the edge of themselves and didn't jump, they just took one slow step back toward the light. Those people know. So if you're one of them, if someone told you that your voice was too loud, or your memory too fragile, or your body too much work, let me be clear. You are not the burden. You are the branch that didn't break, and that I now understand is the greatest revenge of all. Eleanor Thompson, once defined by everyone but herself, finally exists on her own terms, and that I now understand is the greatest revenge of all. Thanks for listening. If you've ever felt the same, betrayed, discarded, or invisible, leave a comment. Someone will hear you. Don't forget to subscribe. Your voice matters.